Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2359. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in Desert Hot Springs, California, where it indeed is a bit hot, with a very special guest by the name of Ronald Ahrens. Ronald, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
Ooga.
There you go. So before we begin, I'd love to ask you this question. What's one little thing that most people don't know about you, Ronald?
What most people don't know about me is that I spent much of my youth at stock car speedways in eastern Nebraska and western Iowa. And if I couldn't be a racing driver when I grew up, I wanted to be track announcer.
Okay. I've had a few of those on the show. Well, that's a good thing because that means some petrol runs in your veins. And that's definitely what we're going to be talking about today. Let me introduce you and we'll dive into what your career has looked like. Ronald Ahrens is a freelance writer who contributes to Our Detroit, DBusiness, Detroit's premier business journal, and Palm Springs Life, just down the road from where he lives. A centerpiece of his career is having written for the late and much-lamented Automobile magazine over a 33-year period. I subscribed to that magazine. It was great. He lives in a desert hideaway near Palm Springs, California, and is involved as a volunteer in the Palm Springs International Film Festival and in Modernism Week, the annual festival celebrating Palm Springs design and architecture. I want to come out and go to that. I love that. My dad was an architect. The June issue of Palm Springs Life will feature Ronald's words covering IndyCar. We're going to learn a lot more about Ronald, but first, a word from our sponsors. So sit tight, buckle up, stay cool, and we'll be right back. Years ago, when it was time to renew my collector car insurance policy, my carrier's rates went up. Way up, but my usage was the same and I never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. So what's with that? So I turned to American Collectors Insurance. Has your collector car insurance recently raised your rates for no good reason? Tired of paying an annual membership fee? Then it's time to look around and call American Collectors Insurance. I shopped around, I asked friends for recommendations, and found a winner that I can trust. And boy, I'm glad I did. I saved hundreds of dollars every year and slept better at night knowing my baby was properly insured. American Collectors Insurance have been protecting vehicles since 1976. They provided me with an agreed value insurance policy backed by their history of taking great care of their clients. What could be better than that? So give them a call and ask for a quote today. 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. And protect the ones you love like I did with American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. All right, we are back. So, Ronald, before we dive into some of the things you're doing today, how did you get in this world and career path of writing?
You know, I was an English major in college and decided I wanted to be a writer. Ended up writing for magazines when I was 25, starting then. And a few years later, I got recruited to be part of the original team at Automobile Magazine in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we moved there, my wife and I, in late in 85, and we're part of the launch. The first issue was 86, April. And it was one of those experiences, the founding editor-in-chief, David E. Davis Jr., promised that it would stick with us for the rest of our career, and it was a startup with a real laboratory kind of feel to it, and these huge personalities, money being thrown around, and really an entree to the big leagues. I had come from a pretty obscure freelance background at that point, and everywhere I went, people wanted to know, what is David E. Davis Jr. like? And a great example of that is when I was at a Barrett-Jackson auction in the late 80s in Scottsdale, and these two guys who probably wouldn't normally have paid attention to me invited me to come to the motorhome for a steak after the day, and I found my way out through a zillion motorhomes to their place and knock on the door, and they admit me, and they have a third guest, a hooker named Turbo. And I'm like usually kind of the last to figure things out. So there sit the four of us in the cozy little dining nook of this motorhome, and I'm seated beside Turbo. And how's your day going so far? I don't know, making small talk. They probably thought I was some kind of idiot, but this one guy just kept going. What is David E. Davis Jr. like? And I would tell everybody pretty much the same thing. He was well dressed, erudite, kind of loud, opinionated, usually a little pompous, but he was a great inspiration. However, the mentorship that I got at Automobile was really from the West Coast editor, Michael Jordan, who always called himself the slow white Michael Jordan. But, he was a really discerning tastemaker guy. And if he liked a story that I wrote, that was as good as some big prize. And Michael spent a lot of time bringing me along, I guess I would say.
Yeah, well, lucky to have, bigger than life, David E. Davis, but it sounds like Michael was perhaps a bigger mentor and influence in your writing career. Would I be right to say that?
Yeah. I just was looking through some emails, and I found one where he said, what story was it? You do a better job with going places and doing things than anyone on the staff. Not that it's a very demanding comparison.
Oh gosh, build you up and knock you down a few notches.
Yeah, that's how he was. But, it was that critical view of things that really was necessary. And he could pick out quality. So
that's good to have around, and definitely as a boss, and can nurture and mentor you and kind of move you along. And I mentioned in your intro some of the things that you're doing right now, and I wanted to touch on those. The June issue of Palm Springs Life, which is out.
The July issue is out now. So
great. I mentioned, or I noticed had Joseph Newgarden on the cover from, of course, Indy 500. And talk a little bit about what you got to do with that, because I know that IndyCar, they came out to the Thermal Club, and I've had the people running the Thermal Club as guests here on the show. A great facility, for sure. But how did that all go?
Right. The IndyCar series came to Palm Springs for the first time ever, and that was late January and first 2 days of February. So they did their media content days at the Palm Springs Convention Center, and we all got to have press conferences with them, the drivers, and then out on the track at the Thermal Club for 2 days. So I had persuaded Palm Springs Life editor Emily Chavez Foster to let's do some coverage, and she has a background in, at an F1 title and did a motorcycle title, and so she was interested, and she said she wanted it to be spectacular. We brought a photographer out from LA, and when they got on track, the IndyCar series, they call this spring training, so it's just practice. When they got on track, I made sure that the photographer, Patrick Mouse, got photos of Newgarden. This is kind of fixed on Newgarden. And so Emily told me April 29th, looks like Newgarden will take the cover, and we're all set. The goes off to the printer. And then the day of the race, I thought, it occurred to me finally, wouldn't it be cool if Newgarden wins the Indy 500?
Yeah, wouldn't it be?
They had advanced the release of the cover digital image to the day of the race. And so he did his part. He won the race for us. And, nice working with Joseph like that.
Well, what are the odds? Because winning the Indy 500, I mean, it is so difficult, and to land that. So kudos to you guys. Well, I guess in your foresight that there was an opportunity there. I guess I should hang out with you when you buy lottery tickets, because wow, that was a good land and a great article as well. And another thing I wanted to touch on was you have what's called the American Automobile from Flivver to Furious, your manuscript. Tell me about this.
Right. I've been working on this. It's an automotive history, and it starts in 1895 and goes up to Tesla, and I take a little bit of a different approach, but it's a compact and lively manuscript with a lot of cool details and people. One quick example is just the story of the Army Jeep. It's so interesting, and there are elements to it that we don't think about today. But even after they got the standard kind of Jeep into production, then the Army explored like micro Jeeps to drop out of to land with gliders and drive out onto the battlefield. And there were 3 or 4 manufacturers with prototypes for that.
Yeah, for sure. I had a guest on my show a couple years ago, actually, wrote a book about Jeeps, went very in depth to the history of Jeep, how it all came to be, the fact that it almost didn't happen. And then, of course, Jeep went on to, look at where it is today. I mean, it's one of those vehicles. That was author Paul Bruno. That was show number 1696. You can go back and give that a listen.
Yeah, it's an astonishing story, the inroads into the marketplace and lifestyle, of the Jeep owners. But my approach to this, the American Automobile from Flivver to Furious, is that I try to make it a story of innovation and inspiration.
Well, the automobile, when you think about it, changed the world in so many ways. And one of the things, I had a guest on years ago that he kind of enlightened me a bit, that you don't think about this, at least I had until he said it. He said, we think about when the automobile came about, way back when, we had access to very limited number of things because things couldn't be transported, they couldn't be kept cold. So we really only had, let's say food, for example. We only had access to the food that was grown nearby. Well, this morning I had some blueberries that were grown in South America. And they're, so they're shipped up here, probably on a plane, and then they're put on a truck, and then they're taken to a grocery store, and then I drive a car to pick them up. I bring them home, and here I'm eating fresh, wonderful strawberries, or blueberries, some kind of berry, blueberries, on my oatmeal. And I'm going, oh, these are from Chile. So it's quite amazing what the automobile has done. And this passion that you have for racing, what are some other ways that you've integrated that into your writing?
Well, any opportunity I've had to write about a race cover, I haven't done too much of that, but I love to hang out at the track, of course, and to develop lifestyle features now based on that sort of setting. And I'm really trying to get Christian Lundgaard to Palm Springs to do a little tour of Danish modern furniture collections. He won the Toronto Grand Prix yesterday, his first IndyCar victory. And
that's awesome.
It's funny because they have a pre-race press conference in midweek, so I sat in on that one via Zoom, and I asked him a question he's a 21-year-old from a little town in Denmark, but he has this tremendous racing career already, European karting champ and stuff like that. And so I asked him if he's aware of the larger tradition of Danes who came to the United States in search of success, people like Big Bill Knudsen, who, ran General Motors and then the Office of War Production in World War II. And even somebody like Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica. And he said he hadn't thought about it, but if he keeps winning IndyCar races, I think it's time that he should think about it. And I would love to have him just come by for a little tour of Palm Springs and get a story about that.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Yeah. Well, given his age, I'm sure that's part of it. And he's probably spent so much of his life and time focusing on racing and getting to where he is at such a young age. It's quite amazing. You know, another thing that I find interesting, you have been writing for DBusiness, and you have a regular historical feature in there about Charles Kettering. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Charles Kettering other than he was a successful inventor, an engineer, a businessman. Can you tell us a little bit more about him and why you're writing about him?
Yeah, my feature is on the back page of every issue. It's called Closing Bell in DBusiness. And my current story that's in print is about Loya Saarinen, the part of the team of Eliel and Loya Saarinen, who came to Detroit and opened the Cranbrook Educational Community. And their son, Arrow, was the architect of, Dulles International Airport and the TWA terminal and St. Louis Arch. So, they were a fantastically influential family. And we just rotate topics. And so for September, because it's the Detroit Auto Show in its new decentralized form, we wanted an automotive topic for the column. And I had just read a book about Charles F. Kettering, the amazing inventor from Dayton. He was from a little town in northeastern Ohio or north central, and went to Ohio State electrical engineering in 1904. Then went to work for National Cash Register in Dayton. His big breakthrough there, a couple of them, but probably the biggest was putting an electric motor inside the cash register so that, cashiers didn't have to crank this lever all those years. So it was so successful that, there was this tragic accident in Detroit when a man named Carter, I'll think of his first name, who was the founder of a car company called Carter Car, with the friction drive, and Byron Carter. And he stopped to help a woman whose Cadillac had stalled. And as he, turned that engine crank, it kicked back and broke his jaw. And he died as the result of that injury. There are a couple of varying accounts of how he died, but it was infection. And, Henry Leland, who was running Cadillac and co-founder of Cadillac, felt so terrible that he said he wished he'd never built a car. And they had to find a solution because these people, people were getting their arms broken routinely. So they recruited Kettering, basically, to come to Detroit and electrify the starting of Cadillac cars. And it was an exclusive, the whole Delco starter system with a storage battery on board, and they could add electric lights, for the first time. The whole system was exclusive to Cadillac for 1912, and then in 1913, Hudson and all the General Motors brands, and also not Chrysler, it didn't exist yet. Anyway, they all adopted Delco electric starting, and it spread through the industry, except it took Ford a few more years to adopt it.
Well, the rest is history, as they say. And, talking about that terrible challenge and tragedy of that gentleman passing from an accident like that, it's a nice segue into something I like to ask my guests, and that is a great challenge you faced that taught you a really valuable lesson that perhaps led to something great. Is there something like that you can share?
Yeah, well, I was saying that I was pretty raw when they recruited me to come to automobile. I'd just been a stringer and a freelancer and didn't really know how things work inside an editorial office. So I didn't last very long on the staff, and I wasn't the first person that got fired in that startup, and I wasn't the last, but it was just humiliating. And my family had been, he finally made something of himself, and then I got fired. But they asked me to keep supplying the list of vintage car auction results that I had been doing as a staff member. And so I spent 10 years kind of on the road going to car auctions. And it was a great learning experience for me. Really, every car auction is like an encyclopedia of cars, what's going to come across the block next. And you hear how it sounds and, learn a little of the history of the thing. And so after a while, I stayed at Automobile, as a contributing writer and started contributing features like the story I wrote about Griot's garage in, I'm thinking, 96. And
yeah. When you visited Griot's way back when I was there very early in that career path.
Yeah. And, it's just funny that we were probably in rooms next to each other without knowing it. But so, about around 2000, I started getting a lot of really great feature assignments, and that led to me driving on racetracks on 3 different continents in press events, and all the dreams I had were really realized. So basically, by hanging in there, and usually keeping my mouth shut, and, don't be late with your story. And, I just worked my way back into rotation. Yeah.
Yeah. Just do the work. Well, let's talk a little bit about you and vehicles and cars, because we are on cars. Yeah. Here, is there one special vehicle when you look back in your life that stands out for you? Now, this could be a car you owned, or maybe it's a car you were lucky enough to jump into and you went, wow, I get to do this and get paid for it.
Yeah. A special car for me was our family's 1959 Volvo, which we purchased new, and I was 4. It was the PV 544, I think, and not a real cute thing, but it had a lot of interior features and trim, that was distinctive. And Omaha was like the last place in the country to get foreign cars.
Sure.
Volvo's strategy was to start in the Northeast, then Southern California, and like Houston, and then move inward. So I think Volvos probably were just newly available around 59. And my father was a early adopter type, so we bought this car. And I just always had the awareness that it was special. Mm-hmm. I could still remember when he would shift from third to second at slowing down for a stop sign, and, the gear whine. And in fact, one morning when I was in first grade, I was sitting in the car waiting for him to take me to school. The driveway had just a slight incline, and it popped out of gear. Uh-oh. So I start rolling down toward the street, and I had watched my father real closely, so I reached over and put my foot on the brake and held it there until he came out of the house.
Oh, thank goodness.
Then he accused me of playing with the gear shift. And
trying to drive away in the car. We had some people on our street. This would have been the mid-'60s. I lived in Southern California. That had one of those cars. And I remember thinking, what is that? It looks so different. Yeah. It's so bizarre. And getting to ride to school one morning, as my friend's mom took us to school, and I'm like, this is really different. Definitely different. When you think about the cars, my parents were driving an Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser at the time. So,
oh, wow.
Something
well, I often look longingly at those kind of big wagons, but our car, I think he got the S model, mm-hmm. and that meant that it had twin carbs. So it was kind of the hot version, and he was supposed to sync those carbs regularly, but my father was kind of a procrastinator. So one morning, we were a family together. At that point, I think there were 3 kids. I was the oldest, and my mother and father, and we're on our way to church on Sunday, and there's a fire under the hood.
Oh, no. Uh-oh.
And, he pulls over, no panic, and is kind of used to problems, and the hood up, and just then the fire department arrives, and, it was a big scene, not a big fire overall, but, one of these moments.
Yeah, you don't forget.
Stays with the car.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a bit of a car psychologist. I'm going to crawl into your head a little bit here, Ronald. If you were a vehicle, what would you be and why?
Well, I was wandering into a car showroom when I was 18 years old. This was 73. So, the Lotus Europa was still on the market. And I think that was priced around $8,000, which I didn't have, probably a good thing. But I just had that moment of, oh man, this is the thing. I've got to have this. And I didn't get it. And then they all disappeared. You would almost say a spiritual awakening.
Oh, yeah. Now, why is that?
Well, I had grown up with, my father talking about cars all my life. And he raced as well, raced on the local tracks, stock cars. But he always had the foreign car magazines and was talking to me about overhead cams and, so I really had an awareness of foreign cars, and the Lotus it was so exotic. We never saw things like Ferraris in Omaha. So this was probably the most exotic car I had ever seen up to that point.
So you identify as that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that was the thing I would have done if I had $8,000 and a lot of British tools.
Yeah, definitely. Or a good mechanic for sure. Now, one of the people, a guy who's become a friend of mine that's introduced so many people to this show, his name is Doug Stokes, and he brings me some very, very unique characters, I should say, like you. And he was chatting and said, you got to have Ronald on the show. But the name of your business, Baggy Paragraphs, Doug said to me, ask him, where did that come from? What does that mean? So I got to ask you, Ronald, Baggy Paragraphs, what gives?
Well, it's supposed to be self-explanatory, right? But,
okay. All right.
I think I was in the 90s. I was just searching for my first email address, and I realized I could make it anything. So that was a phrase that existed in a notebook, and I decided Baggy Paragraphs kind of describes my writing.
Okay.
We came from a period of, Jack Kerouac and unconscious writing, and then the new journalism, really lay it on thick. So kind of like that. And then also I try to be funny. So there is that baggy pants comedian tradition.
Okay.
And I just combined them. And recently I was speaking to someone, people from New York, they take themselves very seriously. And I was speaking to a publicist from New York who was obviously outraged at my handle, Baggy Paragraphs Company, which honestly is just a name on paper. It's not a legal entity anyway. I'm a freelance writer, one person operation. But I thought, well, I guess you don't get it, and a lot of other people do, and every now and then somebody gets a giggle out of it. Even David E. liked it. So there.
There. Well, that's the best endorsement you can have. Well, Doug, there you go. There's the founding concept of Baggy Paragraphs. So now you know. Books are a big part of Cars Yeah. I love to ask people for book recommendations so our listeners can have some even more enjoyment from books in their lives. Is there a book that you could recommend to us?
Oh, man. Any nonfiction by Tom Wolfe. I was just talking about that new journalism, and I meant to say stream of consciousness, type of writing, which he didn't do exactly, but he could extend a sentence and really like a tightrope act. And so my girlfriend Karen likes to knit, and I read to her while she knits. And so we just reread The Right Stuff aloud, and we laughed so hard in so many places. That book holds up so well, and not just the satire, but also his analysis, about these military pilots who volunteered for the space program. He places them in the tradition of the single combat warrior, and, it becomes really meaningful. He has a brilliant way of making a point that not many other people were capable of making. His insight, is even greater than. And currently, I'm reading his architecture book, From Bauhaus to Our House, and it's the same way. I mean, he just destroys these European modernists.
Well, the first Tom Wolfe book I read was titled The Pump House Gang, and that's because...
Oh, I've never read that one. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's about a group of guys back in the 60s, 50s, 60s that were surfers down at Wind and Sea. And I grew up in La Jolla and surfed Wind and Sea. And the Pump House Gang was a story about those guys. And in fact, I had a good friend growing up whose father was one of the original Pump House Gang guys. In fact, he gave me a huge old longboard surfboard. It was so big I couldn't carry it myself when I first started surfing. I think
you need a woody wagon for that.
Well, you did, yeah. And I think at one point 3 of us took it out and we all 3 surfed on it. It was so long. Yeah, Tom Wolfe. Yeah, interesting writer for sure. So let's go on the ultimate drive. I'm a bit of an enabler. I'm going to do something kind of cool. I'm going to park any car in the world in your driveway. You can take it anywhere, but here's the key thing. Since you're into characters and being around interesting people, you can take anybody with you, including somebody from the past who's no longer with us. So what does the ultimate drive look like for you, Ronald?
You know, I just did the ultimate drive last summer.
Oh, wow.
22. With my girlfriend, Karen, and I'm going to really disappoint you here on the automotive front.
Okay.
I have a 2012 Volkswagen Jetta Sportwagon S with the 5-cylinder gas engine, and it's got a 5-speed manual gearbox. And I love that car, and it can take a beating. So we spent a couple of weeks in southeastern Utah, and one of our excursions was early, like up before dawn, out the door in order to go to Natural Bridges National Monument.
Oh, beautiful place.
And from there, to get there, we had to ascend the Moki Dugway, which is a dirt road up from the plateau to the top of a really tall mesa. And at dawn, you know, the colors are breaking. Do you know the word cinnabar?
Cinnabar, yeah, I know. In fact, there's a car color called cinnabar. I'm trying to remember which car that it went on, but I believe if I'm thinking of the right word.
Yeah, well, it's used to describe the color of the sandstone in Utah as well.
Yeah,
and other words too, you know. But that's one of those names of a color, and those colors come out at daybreak, you know, and then as the sun rises in the sky, they become more brown then, you know. But so we had these first gear corners creeping up this dirt road, clinging to the edge of a mesa, and maybe a 1,500-foot elevation gain there up to the top. And we were learning the names of the individual bridges in Natural Bridges National Monument: Sipapu, Owachimo, and Kachina.
They all sound like Native American names.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a Kachina is a doll, you know, and that was our topic of conversation. Plus, the day before, we'd had lunch at Monument Valley, which you can see it's just off to your left as you climb the Moki Dugway, and Karen was introduced to Navajo fry bread, which is, you know, a real cool experience. And so that's what we were consumed with there.
Well, you're going to be a cheap date today then, so I don't have to buy you a car or a journey. You've already done it. So
yeah.
That sounds like a fun one. I did a quick search on Cinnabar. I knew I'd heard that before as a color for cars. And guess what? Mercedes-Benz, Buick, Aston Martin, Ford, BMW, Lexus, all have cars or had cars at some point with a color option of cinnabar. So that is a very popular color. I think it was BMW is where I got that from because I've had lots of BMWs. So very nice. It instills a lot of thought. Well, you've taken us on a fun journey today, Ronald, and I'm so grateful that Doug connected us. Thank you, Doug, for putting another interesting, inspiring guest here on Cars Yeah. Before I let you go, though, could you share maybe some words of inspiration, a success quote, or a mantra with us?
Well, a mantra. I mean, I was just digging through a file and I from a trip to Barcelona in 91, and I pulled out a little sheet of paper that said, "No se hizo la miel para la boca del asno," which is honey isn't for donkeys.
Okay, you got to elaborate on this one.
I don't even know why I wrote that down or where it came from, but they don't make honey for the mouth of the donkey. Honey isn't for donkeys. Anyway, that's not really inspirational. It's just one of those dichos or sayings that you come up with. But as far as any kind of suggestion for people, I mean, I love the specialty of automotive journalism. It attracts a lot of people who are super enthusiastic. I just want to say, you know, you need to work on your sentence structure and learn your English language a little better. Or, you know, I don't mean to condescend to anybody. There's a lot of great writers. I mean, John Phillips III, Dan Neal, Don Sherman is a great writer, and those guys have it. But I see a lot of, you know, bloggers, and they're good at getting a post up, but it's you know, maybe you could work on your writing a bit, and that's what I've always tried to do.
Yeah, I think it's you know, it's akin to what's happened in photography too. I think people have gotten lazy, and those of us reading and those of us consuming haven't said, "Come on, you can do better than that." We just accept it, and I kind of find it a little bit sad because I agree with you. Writing has declined, I think, overall, because so many people now can put things out there and they don't think very much about what they're saying and how they're saying it. They're just doing it. And it's the same with photography. I think photography's been dumbed down a lot by people with all these smartphones that we've all been conditioned to go, oh, that's a beautiful photograph, when, you know, really it was pretty mediocre or less than compared to great photographers, right?
I'm trying to be encouraging to other writers and new writers, you know, but also work in a joke once in a while.
There you go. Yeah, lighten up. Exactly what the world could use. How can people follow you, Ronald?
Oh, gosh. I am on LinkedIn and Facebook, so I'm sort of a recluse in a way, I guess. But I am a public figure in that I volunteer for the Palm Springs International Film Festival, and I just did some driving for them, cargo pickup and return for their short film festival. They rent computers from a place in Hawthorne, which is 120 miles away, so I did the cargo run for them both ways, second year in a row, and I'm active in those sorts of things.
Well, very good. I love it. Ronald, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your expertise and sharing your experiences. This was a fun journey with you. Until you and I talk again, maybe I'll get out there to Palm Springs to that home tour. I'd love to go see that. Maybe you could take me around and show me some of the wonderful homes and architects during Modernism Week. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Nice talking with you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity.
It was great fun. How did you discover your path to a fulfilling life? Too many young people flounder in finding an education and a career that fits. But for those who have a passion for cars, trucks, and motorcycles, and who love working with their hands, problem solving, and fixing things, a career as a professional auto technician is incredibly rewarding. Cars Yeah! is pleased to team up with TechForce Foundation, our charity of choice, in bringing scholarships, technical education, and hands-on experience to young people so they can discover a possible future. Join me and lend your support by visiting techforce.org today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah! Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah!